I still remember the exact moment my life split into a before and an after. It was a Thursday afternoon, one of those warm spring days when my flower shop smelled like heaven, roses, lilies, and fresh lavender, all mixing together in the air. I was arranging a bouquet for a bride-to-be when my phone buzzed on the counter. At first, I ignored it. I was in my flow, trimming stems and wrapping ribbon. But then it buzzed again, and again, relentless. Finally, I wiped my hands on my apron and reached for it, half expecting it to be a delivery delay or one of my suppliers. But it wasn't. It was Daniel, my husband. The message on the screen made my stomach drop. "I'm done, Isabela. I've found someone who actually makes me feel alive. Her name is Sarah, and we're moving to LA tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, I cleaned out our joint account. Don't bother calling me. This is goodbye." I froze. For a moment, it didn't feel real. My eyes scanned the words again, slowly, as if maybe I'd misread. But no, the meaning burned through me. Every word was a knife. My hands started shaking, so badly I nearly dropped the vase in front of me. The bride-to-be noticed my pale face and asked softly if I was all right. I forced a smile, told her it was just allergies, and excused myself to the back room. The second I was out of sight, the mask fell. I leaned against the counter, heart pounding, vision blurring, as tears threatened to spill. This wasn't just betrayal. It was robbery, humiliation, abandonment, all packed into a single smug text. And the worst part? He didn't even have the decency to face me in person. After 12 years of marriage, after building a home and a business side by side, he thought he could just send me a goodbye, like a teenage fling. Anger started boiling beneath the heartbreak. I opened my banking app with trembling fingers, praying it wasn't true. But as the screen loaded, my chest tightened. The joint account balance read $47.12. $47. Out of the thousands I'd worked so hard for. My tears dried instantly. Rage replaced them. But even in that moment, through the storm of emotions, something inside me clicked. Something sharp, focused. Daniel thought he had broken me with that text. He thought he had taken everything. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't know, was that I had been preparing for this moment. Quietly, carefully, patiently. And as I stared at that empty bank account, I made myself a promise. This wouldn't be the story of a woman abandoned. It would be the story of a woman who outsmarted her betrayer. And by the time I was done, Daniel Rossi would regret ever underestimating me. People always assume betrayal comes out of nowhere, like a thunderstorm on a sunny day. But, looking back, there were always warning signs. Tiny cracks beneath the surface of my marriage that I ignored, patched over, or convinced myself weren't real. Daniel and I met when we were just 20. He was charming back then. The magnetic. The kind of man who could walk into a crowded room and instantly draw everyone in with his smile. I was quieter, more grounded. I loved plants, books, slow mornings with coffee. He loved adventure, risks, and the thrill of being noticed. At first, we balanced each other out. He'd push me to take chances, and I'd keep him steady. It worked, or at least, I thought it did. When we married at 25, I used the little inheritance from my grandmother to open the flower shop I'd always dreamed of. Daniel helped at first, but soon, his interest faded. He said the shop was too small time, that I was wasting my potential arranging roses for brides, when we could be building something bigger. Something for him, because that's what I started to realize. Daniel didn't want to build a life together. He wanted an audience. He wanted applause. And if he wasn't the center of attention, he grew restless. It began with late nights at work. He was in finance, or at least, that's what he told everyone. He claimed he was climbing the ladder, hustling, networking, but the inconsistencies piled up. The dinners with clients that always ended at 2 a.m., the credit card charges at upscale bars, the smell of perfume that wasn't mine lingering on his shirts. I confronted him once, timidly, asking if he was seeing someone. He laughed in my face, and told me I was paranoid. Why would I cheat on the woman who's holding me back from real success? He sneered, one night, after too many drinks. That line stuck with me. Holding him back, it was the first time I realized he didn't see me as his partner. He saw me as an anchor, something weighing him down, while he reached for bigger, shinier things. But here's the thing. I wasn't as naive as he thought. I grew up in a family where money was always tight, where women were taught sometimes brutally to prepare for the worst. My mother used to say, never rely on a man's promises. Rely on what you can secure for yourself. So, while Daniel was out chasing nightlife and validation, I started my own quiet insurance policy. Whenever the flower shop did well, I skimmed a little off the top and tucked it away. Not in our joint account. Oh no. Daniel watched that like a hawk. Instead, I opened a small savings account in my name only, under the radar. It wasn't much at first, just a few hundred here, a few hundred there. But over the years, it added up. I also began collecting information, not in a scheming, villainous way, but in a protective way. Every drunken insult, every late-night lie, every slip-up he thought I'd forget. I kept notes. Digital and physical. Screenshots. Bank statements. Receipts. Because deep down, even if I couldn't admit it at the time, I knew this day would come. The day Daniel would finally cross the line. And when he did, I wasn't going to be the fragile, abandoned wife he expected. I was going to be ready. I remember the exact night the illusion shattered. It was a Wednesday in late spring. One of those nights where the shop had been buzzing all day with wedding orders. I was exhausted. And Daniel had texted that he'd be working late again. Nothing unusual. Or so he thought. Something in me, though, snapped that evening. Maybe it was the way he'd brushed me off that morning when I asked if we could have dinner together. Maybe it was the condescending tone he used when he said, Isabella, not everything revolves around flowers, you know? I poured myself a glass of wine, sat on the couch, and decided, enough pretending. I opened his laptop. Now, Daniel wasn't careless. He had passwords on everything. But, living with a man like him for nearly a decade, you pick up on patterns, birthdays, lucky numbers, the names of obscure baseball players he idolized. And sure enough, after 3 tries, I was in. The first thing I checked was his email. At first, it was boring work threads, bills, spam. But then, buried in a folder marked travel, I found something that made my stomach drop. Hotel confirmations. Not just one. A series of them. 5-star hotels across New York, Miami, even Chicago. Some during weekends he told me he was on business trips. Others on random weekdays. Each booking was for 2 guests. 2. I scrolled further and found an email receipt for a diamond necklace from Tiffany's. A necklace I'd never seen. My hands shook. My heart hammered in my chest. But I wasn't just devastated, I was furious. Furious that he thought I was too stupid to notice. Furious that he spent our money on someone else. I snapped pictures of everything on my phone. The hotel bookings, the receipts, even screenshots of his text confirmations. I backed them up on a cloud account Daniel didn't know existed. That was evidence, Hassan. But it didn't stop there. The deeper I dug, the uglier it got. In his private messages, yes. I went there. I found entire conversations with women. Multiple women. Some flings. Some apparently longer arrangements. He was sloppy, reckless. One thread in particular stood out. It was with a woman named Sarah. She wasn't some random fling. She was invested. The texts read like a twisted romance novel. She called him her future. Talked about the house they'd buy together. She even sent him pictures of herself shopping for dresses. Captioned, "For when I'm your real wife, not the placeholder." That word. Placeholder. That's how Daniel had framed me to her. It was like being stabbed in the chest. But here's the thing about betrayal. Once you move past the initial shock, once the tears dry, something else takes root. A kind of cold, sharp clarity. And in that clarity, I realized something. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He was planning his exit. Slowly, carefully. He was building a new life with this Sarah. A life that erased me completely. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed up cataloging everything. Screenshots, notes, dates. I even pulled out a notebook and started writing a timeline of his lies. By dawn, I had evidence #2 text messages that proved not only infidelity, but intention. Intention to discard me like trash, while parading this other woman as his shiny new prize. And the more I uncovered, the calmer I became. Because suddenly, this wasn't about heartbreak anymore. This was about strategy. If Daniel wanted to play dirty, fine. But he underestimated one thing. I had already prepared for this moment. And unlike him, I didn't gamble without a plan. The next morning, when Daniel walked through the door with his usual smug little grin, I almost laughed. He kissed me on the cheek like nothing had changed, set his briefcase down, and launched into a speech about how tough his meetings had been. His lies rolled off his tongue so smoothly, it was almost impressive. Almost. But here's the thing. He had no idea I knew, and instead of screaming, instead of shoving the evidence in his face like I wanted to, I smiled. I asked him if he wanted pancakes. I pretended to be the doting, oblivious girlfriend he always thought I was. Why? Because confronting him then and there would have been like playing my cards too early in a poker game. I wasn't going to blow up and give him the satisfaction of painting me as the crazy woman. Oh no. If Daniel was building a secret life behind my back, I was going to make him believe I was still blind to it, while I sharpened the knife behind my back. That day, I started studying him. I noticed the way he checked his phone compulsively, always flipping it upside down when I entered the room. I noticed how he left early on Fridays, claiming he had end-of-week deadlines. I noticed his cologne stronger than usual, like he was showering himself in it before meeting her. And every time he left, I documented. I became two people. Outwardly, I was still sweet Isabella, running the flower shop, asking how his day went, pretending to care about his stories. But inside, I was a hunter patient. Precise. Watching her prey dig his own grave. One Friday night, while he was working late, I tailed him. Not too close, just far enough to confirm my suspicions. He didn't go to the office. He didn't even go downtown. He drove across town to a high-end restaurant, valet parked, and walked inside with Sarah on his arm, like she was the love of his life. They looked like a movie couple. He pulled out her chair, poured her wine, leaned in close. And me? I was sitting 2 tables away, hidden behind a wine glass, taking photos on my phone, with my heart pounding like a war drum. That was evidence #3. Proof that this wasn't just some online fling. This was real. This was public. And he was bold enough to flaunt it. The worst part? At one point during the dinner, he raised his glass to her and said loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. To us, and to the future we're building. I gripped my glass so hard I thought it would shatter. But instead of storming over and causing a scene, I took a deep breath and smiled to myself. Because the deeper the betrayal cut, the more I realized something. Daniel wasn't in control anymore. I was. By not confronting him, I was free. Free to gather, free to strategize, free to make sure that when the final blow came, it wouldn't just sting. It would ruin him. So I sat there that night, sipping my wine, snapping my pictures, and thinking, not yet, Daniel, not yet. The confrontation he thought would come, the screaming, the tears, the begging, it was never going to happen. Instead, I would be the storm he never saw coming. After the restaurant incident, I couldn't stop thinking, how deep does this go? Cheating was bad enough, but I knew Daniel. He was a man who always wanted control, always wanted to feel superior, and if he was bold enough to wine and dine his mistress in public, then this wasn't just about lust. This was about power. I had to know more, so I went back to the laptop, back to his phone when he wasn't looking, back to the little cracks in the mask he wore so well, and what I found made my skin crawl. The first discovery was in our bank account. I'd always trusted Daniel to handle the big finances. I managed the flower shop, my own earnings, but our shared savings? He insisted on taking the lead. Don't worry about it, Bella, he'd say. I'm good with numbers. You just focus on your flowers. Well, apparently being good with numbers meant funneling thousands of dollars into secret credit cards and luxury purchases, plane tickets, hotel suites, jewelry. And the kicker? He wasn't paying off the cards. He was racking up debt in both our names. My chest tightened when I realized what that meant. If things went south, I wasn't just the betrayed girlfriend. I'd be left holding the financial noose he tied around my neck. That was evidence #4. But it didn't stop there. In his emails, I uncovered messages with a real estate agent. He wasn't just planning dates with Sarah. He was house hunting. Luxury condos, suburban mansions, places well out of my price range, but perfectly aligned with the fantasy he was building with her. The emails made me sick. He referred to me as a complication I'll be out of soon. A complication. After nearly a decade together. After I poured my savings, my sweat, my time into helping him climb out of debt in the early years, I was nothing but a footnote in his shiny new future. That was evidence #5, but the final straw came a week later, when I got an unexpected phone call. It was from a mutual friend, someone who hesitated, who lowered their voice before speaking. Isabela, listen, I don't know how to say this, but I saw Daniel at the country club last weekend. He wasn't alone. He introduced that woman Sarah as his fiancée. Fiancée. Not girlfriend. Not just a friend. Fiancée. I nearly dropped the phone. I thanked the friend, hung up, and sat there in silence. For what felt like hours. Because that word changed everything. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He wasn't just draining our money. He wasn't just planning to leave. He was already replacing me. Publicly. And the cruelest part? He hadn't even had the decency to end things with me first. I looked around the apartment, the furniture I picked out, the artwork I hung on the walls, the little souvenirs from trips I thought meant something, and it all felt like a stage set, a prop in Daniel's performance, until he swapped me out for his new co-star. That night, as I lay in bed beside him, his arm draped around me like everything was normal, I stared at the ceiling with my mind racing. This wasn't just betrayal anymore. This was war. And war required strategy, so I made myself a promise. Before Daniel could humiliate me, discard me, and move on with his spotless reputation intact, I would dismantle him, piece by piece. He wanted to treat me like a placeholder. Fine. But I would be the last placeholder he ever underestimated. The night I learned Daniel was introducing Sarah as his fiancée, something inside me snapped into place. It wasn't rage anymore. Rage burns hot and fast. This was colder, sharper, a kind of clarity I'd never felt before. For weeks, I had been gathering, documenting, archiving, but that night, lying in bed beside him, while he snored like a man without a care in the world, I whispered to myself, enough collecting, time to strike. I knew I couldn't just storm out, screaming betrayal. That would make me look unhinged, bitter, replaceable. And that was exactly what Daniel wanted for me. To disappear quietly, so he could slip into his new life with Sarah, spotless and untarnished. No. If Daniel was going to replace me, then he was going to pay for it. Publicly. Permanently. So I began building my plan. The first step was securing myself financially. I met with a lawyer discreetly, under the guise of business advice for my flower shop. I laid out the debts, the accounts, the joint purchases, and asked the hard question. What happens if he leaves me with all of this? The lawyer didn't mince words. You need to protect your assets. Now. So I quietly shifted. Opened accounts in my name only. Transferred the shop's savings into secure investments he couldn't touch. Even rerouted the shop's mailing address, so no bills, no notices, no bank letters would ever cross his eyes. Daniel had thought he made me financially dependent. He was about to find out I wasn't the naive girl he met years ago. That was step 1 of my revenge. Step 2 was psychological. I stopped reacting to his little jabs. When he rolled his eyes at my questions, I smiled sweetly. When he claimed he was too busy for dinner, I kissed his cheek and said, "Of course, darling." What he didn't realize was that my silence was calculated. Every time I didn't flinch, didn't argue, didn't show pain, he got cockier, sloppier. He thought he was winning, when really, I was letting him walk straight into the fire I was building. Step 3 was gathering allies. I didn't blast his secrets to everyone, not yet, but I carefully, strategically planted seeds. A quiet conversation with a neighbor about how Daniel was traveling so much lately. A casual joke to a family friend about how I couldn't keep track of his stories anymore. Just enough to make people notice his absences, his inconsistencies. Because when the final reveal came, I wanted the audience primed. I wanted them to connect the dots themselves and say, "Of course. How did we not see it before?" And then there was step 4. The most dangerous. The most thrilling. I decided to infiltrate his fantasy. One evening, while Daniel was showering, I slipped his phone from the counter and scrolled to his texts with Sarah. I memorized her style, her tone, the little inside jokes they shared, and then I created a fake number with a messaging app. Over the next week, I sent Daniel a series of cryptic, anonymous messages. Nothing too obvious, just enough to spook him. Does Sarah know everything about you? Secrets have a way of surfacing, Daniel. Enjoy your dinner last Friday. Nice suit. Watching him unravel was delicious. He grew paranoid, snappish. He double-checked locks, scanned the street when we walked together. One night, I caught him pacing the living room at 2 a.m., clutching his phone like it was a lifeline. He had no idea the storm was already inside the house. And as I watched him sweat, as I watched him start to stumble under the weight of lies he thought he controlled, I realized something monumental. I wasn't scared of him anymore. The power had shifted. He just didn't know it yet. By the time summer rolled around, Daniel thought he was untouchable. He'd grown bolder, even smugger. Nights away became normal. He strutted into our apartment, as if it were still ours, not realizing he was already living a double life that was about to cave in. But while he thought he was playing me, I was laying the groundwork for his destruction, and my stage was almost ready. Every great trap needs an audience. Remember those little seeds I planted? The neighbor, the family friend, the casual comments. They were starting to sprout. People were already whispering about Daniel's late nights and strange behavior. Now it was time to gather them in one place. I chose his upcoming birthday party. He loved being the center of attention, loved the praise, the speeches, the spotlight. So I told him I'd host a small celebration at our place. He grinned like a child promised candy. Perfect. What he didn't know was that I had invited not just his colleagues and friends, but a few carefully chosen people. The mutual friend who'd seen him with Sarah, the neighbor who noticed his late-night absences, and most importantly, his family. People whose opinions mattered, people whose respect he craved. I spent weeks curating the evidence, screenshots of hotel bookings, pictures from the restaurant, copies of the bank statements, showing debt he tried to bury under my name, and those sickening texts with Sarah, where he called me a placeholder, all neatly organized in a slideshow. Nothing doctored, nothing exaggerated, just the raw truth, stripped bare. I hid it on a USB, tucked away, ready to plug into the TV at the perfect moment. But I didn't stop there. I printed some of the juiciest pieces too. The diamond necklace receipt, the house hunting emails, and a copy of one especially damning text where he wrote to Sarah, "Soon she'll be out of the way, and we can finally start our real life." That single line was going to be the knife that cut his carefully curated image to shreds. To pull Sarah into the trap, I needed a lure. So, using that fake number, I messaged her directly. Nothing obvious, just a friendly tip. You deserve to be celebrated too. Why let him keep you a secret? His birthday party is this Saturday, at his apartment, 7 p.m. I knew her type. She wanted the spotlight as much as he did. And sure enough, she showed up that night, dressed like she owned the place, ready to stake her claim. On the day of the party, I was calm. Too calm. While Daniel preened in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie, I kissed him on the cheek and whispered, "You're going to have the best night." He smirked, not knowing how right I was. As guests arrived, I floated around the room with a glass of wine, greeting everyone warmly, smiling like the perfect hostess. Daniel basked in the attention, soaking up the laughter, the compliments, the spotlight. And then right on cue, Sarah walked in. The room fell into stunned silence. Daniel's face drained of color, then flushed red. He stammered, tried to play it off, but Sarah was already introducing herself as his fiancée. Gasps, whispers, the first crack in his armor. That's when I stepped forward, feigning surprise. "Oh, Daniel, you didn't tell me we had something to celebrate tonight." The tension was electric. Everyone's eyes darted between us, between him and Sarah. "And Daniel?" He was stuttering, sweating, scrambling for words. That was my cue. I clinked my glass, commanding attention. "Since tonight is clearly full of surprises," I said, "I think it's only fair to share a few of my own." And with that, I walked to the TV, plugged in the USB, and hit play. The room went silent, except for the hum of the slideshow. Photo after photo, Screenshot after screenshot. Hotel bookings. Jewelry receipts. Text messages. Calling me a placeholder. Financial statements proving he was drowning us in debt while funding his little fantasy life. Every slide was a knife. Every whisper in the room was a cut. And then the final blow. That text to Sarah. Soon she'll be out of the way, and we can finally start our real life. Gasps. Someone muttered. Oh my God. Daniel lunged forward, trying to turn it off, but I stepped in front of him. My voice was calm, icy, lethal. Sit down, Daniel. This is your party after all. He froze. Everyone stared. His world, the image he spent years building, was burning in front of the very people whose approval he needed most. And I had never felt more powerful. The slideshow ended, but the silence in the room was deafening. Daniel stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, gasping for air. The spotlight that he loved so much had turned into a blinding glare, exposing every lie, every betrayal. And I just stood there, calm and unshaken, as the weight of the evidence sank into every single person in that room. His mother was the first to break the silence. Daniel, is this true? Her voice was trembling, filled with disbelief. Daniel raised his hands as if trying to push the words back into the air. No, this is taken out of context. She's lying, But before he could finish, the mutual friend I had invited stepped forward. I saw you with Sarah. Twice. You weren't even trying to hide it. A murmur rippled through the crowd. His father's jaw tightened. His sister shook her head in disgust. Everywhere he turned, Daniel saw judgment, betrayal, anger. The walls were closing in, and this time, he couldn't charm or talk his way out. And then, as if the scene wasn't chaotic enough, Sarah made her move. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the floor, her face flushed with fury. You told me she was out of the picture! She screamed. You said you loved me, that we were building a future together. Do you know how stupid I look standing here? Her voice cracked, not with shame, but with rage. She grabbed a wineglass from the counter and hurled it against the wall, the shatter echoing like a gunshot. Daniel tried to calm her down, but she shoved him hard in the chest. Don't you touch me, you liar! The crowd recoiled. His two worlds, his wife and his mistress, had collided in the most brutal, public way possible. I didn't need to say much. The evidence spoke for itself. Guests whispered loudly now. All this time? He stole from her? What kind of man does that? Daniel's colleagues looked uncomfortable, already calculating how this scandal would ripple back to work. His family sat in silence, the shame written across their faces. His father muttered something under his breath. Disgraceful. And Daniel? He was unraveling. His perfect mask had cracked wide open. The arrogant, confident man who once strutted through life was now pacing, sweating, stumbling over words that no one believed. I let the room simmer in his humiliation before stepping forward, my voice calm, deliberate. Daniel, I said, you didn't just betray me. You tried to bury me under your lies, your debt, your games. But tonight, everyone sees you for what you are. I pulled out the printed receipts and texts, dropping them one by one onto the coffee table, like cards in a high-stakes game. A cheater, a manipulator, and a coward. He lunged forward, desperate, grabbing at the papers. Stop it, Isabela! You're ruining me! I looked him dead in the eye and replied, No, Daniel. You ruined yourself. The room erupted with nods and whispers of agreement. For the first time, the man who thrived on admiration was met only with disgust. Sarah stormed out, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. His family followed, their faces cold and distant. His colleagues slipped out quietly, avoiding his eyes, already preparing the gossip that would spread like wildfire by morning. And in a matter of minutes, the room was nearly empty. Daniel stood there in the wreckage, broken glass, scattered papers, the ashes of his perfect reputation, alone. I walked past him, my heels clicking against the floor, and whispered as I passed, Enjoy your new reality, Daniel. This is the life you built. And then I left him standing there, surrounded by the ruins of everything he once held dear. In the days that followed, the collapse was total. His family cut ties. His boss called him in, furious over the scandal that had leaked into the workplace. Colleagues whispered behind his back, until he finally quit in shame. And Sarah? She blasted him on social media, exposing every lie he told her, ensuring the whole city knew the truth. He tried calling me, begging, threatening, pleading, but I never answered. His words no longer mattered. The man who once thought he was untouchable had lost it all. Reputation, career, respect, love, and me? For the first time in years, I felt free. When I left Daniel standing alone in that wreck of a living room, I thought I'd feel immediate relief. And in some ways, I did. There was a deep satisfaction in knowing justice had been served. But the truth? Walking away from someone who had shaped years of my life wasn't just liberating. It was terrifying. For the first time in years, I was stepping into a world without him, and that's when the real journey began. The morning after the confrontation, I woke up to a flood of messages, friends reaching out, colleagues whispering their support, even distant acquaintances who had caught wind of the scandal. Everyone wanted to know how I felt. But in the quiet of my apartment, away from the noise, I realized how much of myself I had lost. During those years with Daniel, he had chipped away at my confidence, controlled my finances, twisted my sense of reality, until I couldn't recognize the woman I saw in the mirror. So I made a decision. If Daniel had broken me down, piece by piece, I was going to rebuild myself stronger, sharper, untouchable. At first, the victories were small. I cut up the joint credit card that Daniel had maxed out. It felt like severing a chain around my ankle. I started running again, something I had abandoned years ago, because Daniel complained it took too much of my energy. Each step on the pavement felt like reclaiming my own breath. And then, I updated my resume, polishing it, with the same determination I had once poured into Daniel's career. I landed interviews, real opportunities. And when I finally got the job offer I had dreamed of, one that Daniel told me I'd never be good enough for, I cried. Not because I doubted myself anymore, but because I finally knew he was wrong. But even as I rebuilt, Daniel's shadow lingered. He tried calling me dozens of times, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between rage and desperation. "You ruined me, Isabela. You'll regret this." Followed by, "Please, we can fix this. I need you. I can't do this without you. I can't do this without you. I can't do this." But I never responded. I never gave him the satisfaction of hearing my voice again. The old me might have folded, might have gone back, but the new me? She was done. A month after the party, I heard Daniel had moved out of his apartment. He couldn't afford the rent anymore after losing his job. He was crashing on a friend's couch, trying to scrape together freelance work. And then came the final twist of karma. Sarah, the mistress who once believed his lies, posted publicly about him. She revealed not just the cheating, but the money he had borrowed from her too, promising he'd pay her back. He didn't. The comment section lit up. Former co-workers chimed in with their own stories of Daniel manipulating people. His reputation wasn't just tarnished. It was destroyed beyond repair. I didn't have to lift another finger. Karma finished the job for me. With Daniel gone, I started to feel a lightness I hadn't known in years. I redecorated my apartment, painting over the cold grey walls he had insisted on with warm, vibrant colours. I filled my space with laughter, music, plants, and friends who genuinely cared about me. For the first time in years, I wasn't surviving. I was living. And in that freedom, I realised something important. Revenge might have been the spark, but rebuilding myself, choosing myself, was the real victory. If I could leave anyone with a message, it would be this. Sometimes justice doesn't come from waiting for apologies or closure. It comes from creating your own ending, from exposing the truth, reclaiming your voice, and refusing to let someone else define your worth. Daniel thought he had destroyed me, but in reality, he set me free. And as I sit here now, telling my story, I can say with certainty, I'm no longer the broken woman he tried to control. I'm Isabela Santiago, from Chicago, and I rose from the ashes.
Thank you for being here. If you enjoyed this, go watch the one on the left and don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel for more tales of triumph over injustice and a saga of ultimate revenge.